sorry, these videos are going to take time, so I highlight this, I copy, and then I go to Word and I paste it in Word, right? And here's the interesting part. I want to show this to you because I think it's important to kind of see some of this stuff working, because these are tools. These are not like, when we talk about AI, artificial intelligence, we're not at this moment. I don't want to talk about what happens later on. At this moment, artificial intelligence merely are tools that kind of try to put things together in the way in which it has become normative. Whatever the source material is, that's where it's going for, and that's what it's using to tell you, hey, this might be better, right? Using many, many, many in-depth algorithms. The amount of work that goes into this type of programming is mind-blowing to me. But it is what it is. This is exactly what it does. So basically, right, just to show you how this works, right, I have another AI working behind this, right? This one's called Grammarly. It's not much of an AI, at least most people won't call it that big of an AI, but it is, because what it does is that it takes your wording, what you've put down on paper, what you've written, and it tries to provide for you a way of looking at it differently. So it tries to give you, say, hey, you wrote it this way, but it would be clearer if you wrote it this way. Hey, it would be better, and you can go to Grammarly and you can actually select different types of grammar rules that you want to be more specific about, and it'll try to grab some of that stuff for you. But here, right, Grammarly is correcting pi. This paper aims to explore, this is the original sentence, this paper aims to explore and analyze various sociological concepts as discussed with pi, personal artificial intelligence. The concept covered includes socialization, culture, norms, values, social stratification, gender role, race and ethnicity, social interaction, deviance, and collective behavior. Through the exchange with pi, a deeper understanding of these concepts and the AI comprehensions of them will be evaluated. Your job, right? Obviously, to evaluate it. So here we go. So I take to Grammarly, and Grammarly says, no, you should write it like this. This paper explores and analyzes various sociological concepts discussed with pi, a personal artificial intelligence, right? And then it allows you to say, which one is this? Your responsibility, your job, is to use these tools to, help you make sense of this. It's the same way decades ago we used to type things out on a typewriter. I'm sure you must have seen a typewriter in a museum somewhere where you're thinking like, oh my gosh, what if you make a mistake and you have to correct it? It was horrible, right? Because proofreading meant that you had to go back and change it, and hopefully you didn't deformat the rest of the paper and lost the organization of it. But it was one of those things that you have to do. As we started to use, computers and particularly operating systems that then allowed us to be able to do what was simple originally was spell check, right? It would highlight words for you to determine whether they were mistaken, right? You're used to seeing this, right? If you see something like this, right? And you go through the red line and you go, oh, wait, that's wrong. Yeah, understanding, right? That's what I want to say. So you would put it together and you could kind of do this. And it allows you to be able to, it was a tool that allowed you to check the spelling. Sometimes it would check the spelling and it was the spelling that you wanted, but it didn't give it to you. So for example, sometimes you would write a word in Spanish. Actually, kept that one there. So I should tell you I do have dual language on this, so it may allow to keep both. Yeah. Now see, it did a self-correcting there, where it should not. Right, so if I change the language on this, then it probably give me a much better interpretation of that. But this is basically what it would give you, right? It allows you to determine whether or not sometimes you get a word and it's not supposed to be misspelled, and you go fix it and you read it and you decide this is no different than that, except it's a little bit better. And the new AIs, which then write things for you, also give you a tool in which they take your ideas and they put them together, and then it's your job to make sense as to whether they explained it all. Now, this is a first step as to what I'm asking you to kind of do on that second paper. And this first step is very straightforward. It's just kind of like, hey, look at these things and tell me, does this make sense? Does this work with you? So, for example, I'm going to give you an example that I've been looking at, right? Gender roles are the expected behavior, attitudes, and activities associated with a specific gender within a society. When asked about gender role, Pai identified certain expectations, like women being responsible for domestic tasks, or men being expected to provide for their family. These roles vary across cultures and are shaped by social norms and values. Now, for me, not all of you, but for me, there's a red flag. So immediately I would start to correct this and say this was Pai's, original definition and how it describes it, so I can agree. Pai on the general gender role definition. However, I, with the example used. Now, why do I disagree with the example used? Now, see how I can fix this? I agree with Pai on the definition of a gender role. See how that changed? Like also the gender role. And however, I disagree with the example used. What was the example used? Well, certain expectations where women being responsible for domestic tasks. That sounds like a very archaic example, right? You've got to be, 70 years old to sit around and say, like, women are supposed to be, what a gender role? Women take care of the home and men bring money in. Like, that's not been the case for, almost 50 years. Like, this is just ridiculous. That is the most ridiculous kind of way in which you talk about gender roles, and it's just not sufficient. It's not a good example, right? Like it doesn't make sense. I don't think anyone really at this point in time in our society is sitting there going like, well, men are expected to bring, support, provide for their families. Like, anyone who is thinking that way is going to starve their families, right? It's much more complicated than that. So you might want to change it up a little bit. You might want to be more specific. You might want to explain things a little bit in more nuance. So, I would prefer, and this is where you bring in the materials that are outside, right? This is where you start to use the materials that you have been given, the textbook, any outside sources, the lecture. You bring those materials, you cite them, and you bring them in to explain why this definition you prefer, the example that you prefer is better than this one. And you can do this across all of these, because these is, you're going to find that, Pai is a product of its own, source, and the source that it's using is a very limited source. It's not the same thing as your brain and, you learning things and understanding things and then taking those things and turning them into experience, right? It's basically just giving you, what's generically out there that it has linked to these concepts, right? Culture, right? Culture encompasses shared patterns of behavior, values, beliefs that define a group or society. That's perfect. That's almost right out of the textbook. When asked about cultural differences, Pai highlighted unique aspects of Japanese culture, such as the emphasis on politeness, the use of honorifics in language, the traditional art forms like origami and kabuki theater. These elements reflect the norms and values that shape Japanese. Really? Do they represent the norm and values, right? Norms and values, unwritten rules and guides of social behavior, right? These things reflect that. Go back to your source and tell me, is this a good example? That's your job. That's what I expect you to do. That's how you start to assess whether or not AI is really giving you what it should be giving you, and how you can then process and use AI appropriately. Because that is what it comes down to. It isn't about whether or not, AI is there and whether or not you should use it. It's how do you use it? Do you use it to make it better? That's my point.